Ready? I call at 6:30. I'm gonna call the date today is the what, 18th? June 18, 2025. Brandon Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. This is a Wednesday. We're meeting on Wednesday because our regular meeting day tomorrow is Juneteenth, which is a holiday, so we're meeting today instead. Can we do the roll call, please?
Megan. Here. Brian.
Present.
Brooks.
Here.
Rob. Alyssa.
Here.
Michael. Barb.
Barb is out of town, so Alyssa, am chairing the meeting tonight. And we just squeaked by with 4 persons for a quorum. So, next I'll approve entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Heidbrink, so moved.
Bassett, I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion approved. Consent calendar, we have one plat on our consent calendar. Need a motion.
No motion to approve. Heidbrink, second.
A motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Let's see, next we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the last meeting. And I wanted to make a comment on, in the paragraph about the variance. Okay, in the 4th line, where it says Matthew Quick Start Corporation, Zach, we're present via Teams. I'm thinking somewhere down the line in the future, people may not know what that means, Teams. So I would hope to word it, so like via online or, audio. Something, yeah. Nobody may know what the brand name Teams means in the future. I would like it to say something that they were here, they were connected audio but not video. We didn't see their faces. If we could do that, please. Other than that,
Heidbrink, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with Alyssa's comment incorporated.
Bassett, I'll second.
have been moved and seconded to approve the minutes with one slight change. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now is the time during the meeting where we allow public comments, and that would be for anybody who wants to speak on something that usually not on the agenda. I'm not seeing anybody jump up, so we'll move on to item 7, which is a public hearing for a rezoning. Is there anyone here to speak to that application? Come on up.
So just a little bit of rundown before we get started. So the applicant is here. They are looking to rezone this lot. There may be a question why NRC to R2 instead of NRC to R1. We talked about this. Mr. Westcott came in. We talked about it. The reason why we initially thought maybe R2 was because the frontage on the lot wasn't wide enough for an R1 lot, but my understanding is the applicant is, if it has to go R1 and a conditional use, so there's some flexibility there, but that's why the initial proposal is R2 instead of R1, is because of the lot frontage.
Okay, thank you. And sir, there's a button on that doohickey there. If you press it and the little red light comes on, you're good to go. Yep, no, press it again,
Okay.
and just leave it on. And then if you would say your name and address, please.
My name is James Westcott. I live here in Brandon at 817 South 6th Avenue.
Okay, and would you describe to us kind of why it is you're requesting this variance?
We are looking to purchase a piece of property for my son and for my daughter.
I'm sorry, rezoning, that was my
Yeah.
fault, yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're
Looking-
looking to purchase a piece of property for my son and daughter, and this particular piece of land, being a half-acre lot, was something that was interesting to us, to be able to put a duplex or a split home concept on, that my daughter would have one half, son would have the other half. They could build investment equity in it. Someday down the road, if they decide to sell, they've got something, some equity in it that they can then turn into a future home down the road. But for now, it gives them an opportunity to stay around the area and build. We can help them build this home on this piece of property. We've looked at it several years. It's come up on the market, gone off the market, come back on the market. And this year just seemed like the best time for us to look at it. As far as what our plans were, we started talking with Patrick. I'm working with TJ Bartman too. He's kind of helped me a little bit along the process on the purchase side as to what the layout of the property is, the concerns about the setback from the frontage of the road. So we were looking at the R2 as far as what the available setbacks are around the property, as well to what we could do with putting a housing unit on there.
All right, I looked on the map, but I admit I did not drive past it. So if we could get it up there on Google Earth and see a little bit better where we're talking about. This says Pearson subdivision. Is this close to where Marlis Pearson lives? Is it like next to her place? Because I know she lives along that stretch. No? Don't know? Yeah, if you can show us which one that is. And there's no buildings on that lot right now, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And you're wanting to build, like you say, a duplex, so one building, two entrances, but not like a twin home that would have a firewall to totally separate the two halves.
Both concepts are currently being reviewed. We don't have any plans because we weren't sure
Gotcha.
what we're looking at as far as setbacks and the zoning on it. So we are pretty open at this point as far as the planning side of it. I've seen there are several designs in Sioux Falls that fit very neatly into smaller lots that would work really well with this, with the concept. Half acre, it's not a small lot, but
It's bigger than the lot I live on.
but we're not looking to take up the whole lot with a big building. We're
Sure.
not looking to put a
But you
number of
want it to
units
be
on
able to
but
accommodate two residences.
Correct.
For-
two separate residences, so they're
Yeah.
not having to live together.
Yeah, I've often thought it would be nice if my husband and I had a residence like that with a door that you could go from one to the other. But no. So, is there anything else that you need to say about it, Patrick? About
Nope. So
like if there's differences between like a twin home and a duplex
so
for setbacks and whatnot?
So we generally discuss that if you probably have two dwellings and you hope to eventually, or maybe not hope, but eventually to have the possibility of selling one or both off, you'd probably want some degree of mutual access easement. Well, this property is not serviced by either water or sewers from the city, so it would require septic and rural water or well, whatever they're working out. So kind of the bulk of our discussion was how do you approach it zoning wise. NRC, you would be allowed a single family detached dwelling. The minimum lot size in NRC is 1 acre. Lot is a half acre. R1 would work with a conditional use permit for a twin home duplex. Problem there, we talked about was the frontage requirement wouldn't be met, so there would be some playing there, or R2 would meet the requirement, like the requirement's 50, I believe. So it would meet that. I want to say it's right about 70, I think. I think it was 10 short of the R1. It was pretty close, but not there. So that's kind of where we were in the discussion.
So explain to me why the R2 with the conditional use does not work.
Oh, you said R1.
Or sorry, the R1 with the conditional use.
So either option would work. It just depends on which flavor you would like to pursue. The reason why we initially proceeded as an R2 was the frontage. But I imagine the applicant would probably be open to either path, but you could speak to that.
Okay, but the application we have here is requesting R2.
Correct.
So that's the one we have to vote on, right?
Correct.
So, let me get this straight. The frontage requirement for a single home is wider than a frontage requirement for a twin home? For 2 units?
So it depends on your district. If it was R1, single family detached requires 80 feet. Single family attached generally requires 40 feet per unit. So it equals out. If it's on one lot, it's the same. In R2, you go down from single family attached. Total, it just says 25 feet. It doesn't specify per unit. My guess is that was the intent. It does not say that. And single family detached is 50. So my guess is it's supposed to say 25 feet per unit. It does not.
Maybe you should look at that in the future.
And what is the frontage?
The
That wasn't
frontage
in our
for
packet.
R2, the minimum lot width for a single family detached is 50. For single family attached is 25.
No,
minimum lot.
what is the frontage of the parcel?
The frontage is right about 70. So it's just short of the R1, quite a bit larger than, if it's supposed to be 25, if it's supposed to be 50, either way, it's larger.
And when you have a lot that's, I mean, I guess very few lots are actually completely square or rectangular, so that dimension, we talked about it a lot, but does the frontage, that's how we determine that often, is by that, even though it's wider in the back part of the lot?
Correct. The frontage is the property line abutting the street.
So that establishes that minimum width, okay. I had the same question about wondering why it couldn't have been a R1 with a conditional use for twin home, but I guess the lot width requirement helps me with that.
And from a building code standpoint, there is a difference between a twin home and a duplex. Duplex would be one lot, one structure with a very far bar between them. Twin home would actually have a private line between them. And this is duplex, but he would have a choice if the twin home would actually functionally work to put a line between them.
Would that have to be replatted then? Yeah.
Potentially at some point, yes.
Yeah, if it,
Depending on how they laid it out and everything, and we'd look at that whenever they submitted when that time came.
and a duplex actually could someday down in the future become a single family dwelling, could it not? If it met whatever the standards are at that point, whereas a twin home, less likely. If that makes sense.
In order to, if it was approved as R1 and they built the structure and wanted to subdivide it, and it was a single family attached with a line going through the middle, it would require 40 feet of frontage per unit, so we would be 10 short on a
10 short.
subdivision, so
if it were separated for like a twin home, would they have to have like a separate septic tanks? One for each unit, or?
I imagine if they sold them separately, they would probably want a separate septic for each.
If it's a twin home, but if it's a duplex, they could have just the one.
Yep.
There's a lot of, you know,
So originally
a lot of stuff you
I
have to
was,
think.
I was kind of leery about this, and I was gonna push for the R1 with conditional use for duplex. Now, my understanding, the parcel to the south is NRC still, correct?
I believe so, but we'll pull it up.
Next door to the
Yes, I have
south,
the
also
GIS
empty,
up and it's.
no structures on it,
I believe so.
you think so?
Yeah.
We can look on the maps here.
So while he's pulling that up, my concern was if we change it to R2, then they can go up to a fourplex on there. You know, if they sell it or their plans change, and we don't get to see it. So it kind of opens up the can a little bit for some worms. However, we do have to have Patrick said we do have to have 25 feet of frontage per unit, so that would require 75 feet of frontage. So, knowing that they don't have, that they only have 70, that is going to limit them to 2 units on that parcel. Also, with the R2, if it's adjacent to R1, they still have to maintain the 7-foot setback, even though R2 only requires a 5-foot setback. So the only difference would be the parcel to the south, and that is NRC.
Correct.
So for all intents and purposes, they wouldn't really be able to build anything more than a duplex. So I guess considering that, I don't know if it really is gonna make a difference. Yeah, as a spot zone, maybe, but
What is the lot, okay, the lot to the south, the next door lot to the south is, you said, still NRC, how about to the north?
R1.
That's R1, so.
I want to say the lot to the south is the horse farm. They have a couple horses that run around down there.
Are we ready for a motion? Does anyone else have anything they want to say about it? Yes, this, okay, so what we vote on tonight is we will vote on how to recommend to the city council. City council gets, final say on this. So,
Yeah, this is I'll make a motion to recommend approval to the council.
Heidbrink, I'll second.
we have a motion second, any more discussion? Nope. So all in favor, all in favor of the motion to, recommend approval, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Now Patrick, the, city council will hear this when?
July 7th.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, the next item on our agenda, number 8, is a public hearing for Interstate Signage Overlay District. We've talked about this in the past, and recently it came to our attention that maybe we wanted to pull it back and look a little bit at the size requirements. So that might be what we talk about tonight. It's on page 17 on our packet. And I'll open it up to discussion.
You are certainly welcome to stick around, but you don't have to unless you want to.
It's riveting, seriously. Yeah, good. That's good. All of our meetings are broadcast on YouTube. So if you wanna look them up, you just query Brandon, South Dakota Planning and Zoning.
Just don't think, it's not rude if you needed to go and have dinner
Yeah,
or something, so
yeah.
don't worry about that.
Yeah,
I guess maybe before we take action on this, I would like to get everybody's input on this, rather than just the four of us here tonight. So, I would suggest that we table any final vote. We can discuss it, but I think before anybody makes a motion, I would feel more comfortable if we get everybody's input on this. One thing I would like to add though for discussion purposes is, we're changing this one at the same time we're changing, it's farther down the agenda, the number of signs. And
freestanding signs amendment.
yeah, and in the case of like the Quick Star, I don't know if I would want to see 3 90-foot tall signs on a single parcel. And so, if these two, I'm assuming these two will hit city council at the same time, simultaneously?
So the GB freestanding sign ordinance is not scheduled yet for a public hearing, so it would not be on the agenda for July 7th. How would you prefer they proceed? Would you prefer together? Would you prefer separately?
Well, I guess,
If you
Yeah.
wanted to proceed together, if you continued it, we could examine the calendar enough to make sure they join together.
I guess where I was coming at is, if that's approved that we allow multiple signs on a parcel, I would like to change this one to only one sign, maybe the 90-foot height in the interstate overlay district. Because I think we had looked at like the Quick Star property, that could have had 3 signs, 200 square feet, all 90-foot tall. So, in my opinion anyway, in the overlay district, I think we should only allow one sign on a parcel to be 90 feet tall.
I'd agree with
But
that.
that's just my opinion.
One sign on a parcel to be really tall.
Yes.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Because that's kind of the purpose is to reach out to the interstate, and so if you're driving by on the interstate to see it. But I think once you get into the area, I think 30 feet is more than enough to relay anything else. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just my comment. I mean, there may be other opinions.
I think that's a good comment. I hadn't thought of that part of it as much, but I was thinking about the materials that were submitted by the Quick Star and that gave some visuals of what signs appear as and stuff. So I would like us to look at the maximum amount of signage in that overlay district and perhaps make that different than what we're talking about in the general business, and maybe as simply as making that part of it simpler in this, because the general business one starts with 1 square footage of signage allowed per 1 linear foot of frontage up to a certain point. But I almost think for this overlay district that maybe it could stand with just the 1-to-1 with the frontage as far as the size. And then if we want to consider other things like the height, I think that's reasonable and that's a good thing. So if this was to be continued, does that have to be re-advertised then? Or have to start over, kind of?
Continuance for the planning and zoning one would not. The city council one tentatively is still scheduled for July 7th, and that's been noticed, but for some reason, if P and Z got continued past July seventh, then obviously that would have to be renoticed.
Which one, which is which, what? P and Z's on, which one are you, which is which?
So we schedule the public hearings at the same time. So the city council one has been already scheduled for their next meeting, which would be July 7th. But for some reason, if P and Z's leg of things, your public hearing was continued past your meeting on July 3rd, then obviously you couldn't make a recommendation for them to hear on the 7th. So then the city council meeting would have to be republished whenever it was voted on by P and Z. We would figure out when the next meeting was that met state law timing requirements.
So this overlay district is actually a public hearing tonight
Yeah.
and not discussion anymore?
Correct, it was scheduled for public hearing, which if you want to just, you're not necessarily obligated to make a recommendation until you're ready. If you just wanted to cancel it as a public hearing and revert it back to a discussion item, if you wanted to keep continuing it as a public hearing, you certainly could. So there's some options there. It's however you want to do it.
Because it was my understanding that the last meeting, we wanted to delay that so that we could talk about possibly changing the area, the size of the sign.
We discussed that, but I don't think it was a active item on the agenda, so it was just discussion, I think.
I would have to go back when we scheduled the public hearing, but it may have already been scheduled at that point, I'm not sure.
Okay, so. So what do we have to do? I mean, if we discuss this and decide that we can make firm decisions on it tonight, then it can move forward, correct?
If you wanted to vote one way or the other to recommend or not, it would proceed forward. You can vote for continuance. You could,
Okay,
it wouldn't move forward until you make a recommendation.
All right. Oh,
Likewise,
okay.
if it were, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, that's fine. So, since tonight is technically a public hearing, does that mean, are we still allowed to make changes?
Yes. You have in the past made changes at public hearings and then you recommended with X, Y, and Z changes. So you could conceptually continue to discuss and
Okay,
yes. Or if you just wanted to take it back from being a public hearing, you certainly could. Because if you deal with area, it's probably a different looking ordinance than what you're hearing now.
so if we want to make this not a public hearing tonight, what action do we have to do? Just say so, or do we have to vote, or?
I believe you can retract it from being a public hearing. You just wouldn't want to make a recommendation to the city council as your motion.
Okay, so as Brian said, if we want to do some discussion tonight, but not make any recommendation tonight until, hopefully until we are all here, all 6 of us on the commission are here, then that pretty much says that we're not gonna do a public hearing tonight. So we're just not calling this a public hearing, and that's all we have to do is say, well, we're not doing that.
Yes, you would be, I don't know if we necessarily need a motion to withdraw it from public hearing or not, but if you wanted to be procedurally clean, you certainly could. If you did, we would have to renotice whenever it was ready to go as a public hearing. Your other option would be, if it continues, it's still on the calendar as a public hearing till the point you make a recommendation. So it would show up then on July 3rd as a public hearing if you continued it to July 3rd.
And so on and and so forth until we actually make a,
Or if you wanted to just say we're not ready yet for public hearing, we'll just withdraw it from public hearing. You can go that route, then
and
we
then
have to
we have to
republish.
re-advertise it as a public hearing later.
Correct.
Whereas if we just continue it as a public hearing, then any public who wants to speak on it has to keep track of the agenda. Come
Correct.
to every meeting until. How do you guys want to proceed?
I guess, is there interest from anyone else that's here tonight of increasing the size?
I think,
Based on, our last meeting and based on the, action of city council Monday night. I'll throw my
Yes.
opinion out there. I'm not interested in it, but I don't, my reason for not wanting to take action tonight if we change the size is I don't wanna kill it just because of my opinion, because it's gonna take all four of us to approve tonight. And if the other five or four of the six think it's a good thing, then I don't wanna kill it just because they're not
oh,
here
yeah, I
tonight.
see what you're saying. Here's what I'm thinking. When I did the math based on the number of frontage feet that the Quick Start parcel has, there would be no way they would be able to use it all. They would have to just not be able to use all of their allotment. If we limited them to the biggest sign being 200 square feet, they wouldn't be able to use all their allotment unless they had a bunch of small signs, which really wouldn't do them any good. And so that's why I think we should rethink the formula of what we allow. Now, maybe other parcels won't have that much frontage, but this particular one did, and I don't see any reason to penalize them just because they have an extra large, because they have 3 frontages. That was my thinking.
Yeah, I kind of already said this, but I think I have a interest in looking at additional size because I think the example shown by that recent applicant kind of illustrated for me that visibility in that area might sort of require that. And I think we were really focused on height when we first went through this, and I think this has just brought in another aspect of that. So for me, I'm interested in discussing additional size allowances in that overlay district.
And I think it still ought to be based on the frontage. Yeah. Did you have something?
I was just gonna say that I agree with maybe increasing the size somehow. You know, if we're putting them 90 feet in the air, they might want something bigger than that 200. So I think it's worth pulling this back and discussing it a little bit more.
So do we need to make a motion to remove this from the public hearing
Or to
and put it back to discussion?
continue the public hearing to next
Or do
meeting?
we continue the public hearing?
So that I guess is your preference. It's
But if we continue the public hearing, do we still need to go through all the public notifications?
if you continued the public hearing, no. If you withdrew it for discussion, we would have to republish. It kind of depends. Which one do you think is the fair process for public?
I guess here again, I don't wanna kill it just because we would get the majority vote, and so I want everybody's opinion if we're gonna talk about size. And I also want to make sure that this is thought out in conjunction with the other one that we're considering. You know, if we're putting 300 or 400, 600 square foot signs up on a parcel
For what it's worth, we currently, with Quick Star now being decided, we do not have a pending sign application that would be in the overlay, so there is some time to.
Yeah, so we're
Make
not
sure
on
it's
any
correct.
kind of a deadline. And I wanna just make clear that I'm thinking that we need to maybe recalculate, or, recalculate what 2 for 1 or 1 for 1. I'm not even making a complete sentence, but you know what I mean, right? The formula, recalculate the formula rather than say, oh, a 600-foot sign is okay now instead of 2. I mean, in the quick, and it may not even come up on any of the other signs. Maybe all the other lots, it will max out at 2. But 200, I mean. But in this particular parcel, they would lose some of their allotment. They would not be able to use their entire allotment because they have so much frontage.
I thought at the last meeting, Michael and I calculated that what they're putting up now on the variance would exceed their allotment. Based on where we're currently at with the second change that we're looking at.
What is the second change?
With the general business change, yes.
General business change of going 1-to-1 up to 200, and then 1 square foot for every 2 linear square foot. Doing that calculation, the amount of signage that Quickstar is putting up would exceed where we're at with our general business signage pending change. Because where were they, close to 700 square feet?
Yeah, it would, and that's what made me think of the possibility for this overlay district, because we're talking about interstate stuff with higher signs and bigger wants for visibility, that maybe there we could look at a different calculation still based on frontage, which, because like for that instance, like a simple 1-to-1 in that district would work for the Quick Star site if they came after the
One
point.
1-to-1 all the way.
1-to-1, because like the reason we
Where in
put
general business, it still could be 1-to-1 to a certain point, and then 1-to-2.
because I think we were thinking, that we didn't want that. We in a just standard general business, we didn't want someone to have 700 square feet worth of
Correct.
signage available.
Correct.
But in my opinion, I think in this case, we could, and I think that development that we're talking about, there's probably maybe 3 lots that would come into play, because this one is that center circle. This one is half that roughly, I think.
Yeah.
So there's another half. There's a similar lot in there. If it's one tenant, one owner in the future, that could be a similar one. And I think maybe on the east end, there's a bigger lot that at one point was talked about for a hotel or something. I think that one could maybe have more frontage. Probably the rest aren't going to have a tremendous amount of frontage, but that remains to be seen because it's not developed yet. But as far as continuance of this, because I think the only thing a continuation buys us is if we are able to resolve something at the July 3rd meeting. Otherwise, we would have to re-advertise anyway, because it wouldn't be completed for the city council public hearing, which is scheduled just after that. So I think unless we think we can complete something on July 3rd, I think pulling it back from public hearing is probably just as good.
If you want to say what's the most fair to the citizens, you say, well, if we just continue it, then people who want to know about it and speak to it have to, they wouldn't know because it's not advertised. They just have to keep coming back to everything. On the other hand, if we pull it back and have to re-advertise, we're spending taxpayer money to re-advertise it, which, so either way.
I guess in my mind, if we have to re-advertise, it will go out in conjunction with the other one, which has to be advertised.
Yeah.
So it's really a no-cost change. If we put them out simultaneously, right?
They are a separate notice, so I think
Yeah,
the newspaper
it's-
charges by, it's either per word or per line or something.
Oh,
So there would
yes.
be some additional
I think it's
cost there.
Probably
but
by the inch, but yeah.
I don't think it's tremendous. I'm not sure what, I know most of them say published at a cost of
Mhm.
X in the journal, but I'm not sure what that number is. I don't believe it's make
Yeah.
or break money by any means.
So-
but
I mean, I have no strong feelings one way or another about whether we just make it go, what do you guys wanna do?
Well, I don't feel like this is something that, I initially came in hoping that maybe we could find a little bit of language and keep this going on the path and
Yeah.
add something, but I don't think we have a consensus on that at all, and we don't have all the counselors here. So if a motion is required, I guess I would make a motion to pull this back from public hearing and revisit it at a later date.
Bassett, I'll second that.
Been moved in second to, pull this back from public hearing, re-advertise later. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, there we go. And then, so it'll be a discussion item on the next meeting agenda.
correct.
Okay. Hopefully we'll have more people here. We're at number 9, Coughlin Nursery Plan Development. Starts on page 20 of our packets. Where are we with this?
So this is similarly scheduled as a public hearing for planning and zoning on July 3rd, with the city council holding it on July 7th. That's to keep it moving. If for some reason you feel that more discussion is warranted, though, it's possible to pull it back, but I'm sure the Coughlin family would like to keep it moving. So what this does is it creates the Coughlin Nursery Plan Development. It is defined as being just Lot 1 of Coughlin's second edition. That is, once I find there we go. That is the bigger lot where Oak Ridge currently is right now. And it extends down to where the future home will be built. So it just speaks to that lot. It allows, as permitted uses, the current landscaping and nursery retail business. It allows a public event center for the eventual potential transition, as well as the single-family detached dwelling on the lot. So then it gets into the fence regulations. It treats, unless it's specifically different, they would all default to what general business requires. And then it gets down to the minimum lot area was the lot area of that lot, with the minimum lot width as standard for those lots. So the big thing to probably note is the special area regulations about the sidewalks. Right now, the language is no sidewalks associated with any private streets or mutual access easements, which would be potentially required to access the home portion would be required until such time as the private street or mutual access easement is utilized to provide the only access to another lot. So, and whether that's necessary or not, I will leave to our engineer, or whether they just need to go through the process of exempting out of sidewalks, whichever she believes is clear.
The exemption form would be a lot easier for council,
Okay.
since it's not an ordinance. So we have a sidewalk exemption form, which just states kind of that city council determines that they don't have to put in a sidewalk at this time, but they can determine at any time to require to have them put in. Or like if you put it in an ordinance like this and say that they don't need sidewalk, it's pretty hard for city council to go back and enforce sidewalks. So my preference would be the exemption form.
So, the engineer's preference would be to strike special area regulations A. And then property subdivision, anytime that if they did any future subdivision of that lot, a replatting would be required, which then gets back to the minimum lot area. If that's the exact size of that parcel and they eventually want to plat off the house, that number is probably too large.
So Patrick, I have just a couple minor comments. So currently there is no Lot 1 of Coughlin's second addition to the city of Brandon. Correct?
Correct, I
'Cause
believe
that has not been officially passed yet.
correct. We will have to accurately describe it. It is currently lot A, tract 1, and east half of the vacated road lying adjacent, and lot C, tract 2, Bennis tracts, west half, northwest quarter. Continue on, legal description.
But we're only talking about a portion of that.
Correct, it would be a portion of that lot to be platted as. lot
That is
one.
pending to be platted.
Correct.
So I don't know which is first, the chicken or the egg.
Yep.
So that's just one clarification item for me.
Yep, based on what we did with the Trobs edition PD with those townhomes, we had the plat filed with it as an exhibit, and we will act accordingly to the other one. Yeah, the chicken and the egg problem.
So yeah, that's one item. So just kind of working down here. Permitted uses on the bottom of page 20. Landscaping and nursery retail business, public event center, and single-family detached dwelling. So on the first one there, landscaping and nursery retail business. I think it's redundant to have the applicable standard, that first sentence under applicable standards. No outdoor sales, displays, seating areas, or storage areas may be located within 5 feet of a front property line. Because that's covered in chapter 1515 already. Assuming that we also put, when we reference chapter 1515 for landscaping, nursery retail business, and public event center, that all relevant standards that apply to general business within chapter 1515 shall apply. Because when you go to chapter 1515, that references districts. It does not reference uses. And so I think we need to clarify what portions of chapter 1515 actually apply. That it's the general business, not central business, not residential, not, if that makes sense.
Correct. The reason why that was in there because 1515-16A applies to GB, LI, and HI.
Right. So,
Yes, that works to cross out the first part. All
so if we
relevant
say
standards.
relevant standards within chapter 1515 related to general business,
Yep.
apply to landscape and nursery retail, and also to public event center, and then all relevant standards within chapter 1515 relative to R1 shall apply to the single-family detached dwelling.
Yep.
So those are some questions. My other question is, when we get down to the lot and yard regulations, so this, correct me if I'm wrong, this parcel will have 3 front yards and 1 side yard, correct?
Correct. 3 front yards, and they would get to decide between side and rear. But my guess is they would choose the one with the smaller setback.
Right. So when we talk about the front yard, we have 2 primary uses on the parcel. We have the business with a frontage and a side and a entrance off of Highway 11 we have a residence with a frontage and address, I'm assuming, off of Sioux Boulevard. So we have basically two fronts. How do we determine the front yard setback? Because we have two primary uses on the same lot.
Yep.
And so how are we gonna determine if they want to do another improvement on the parcel? What's the front yard, what's the side yard, what's the rear yard? If they wanna add another structure down the road.
So a front yard is everything between the principal building and a front yard lot. So you could conceptually have quite a large front yard on the property.
Right, but, so if 25-foot setback is on the east side,
Correct, it would be on
Does
all three sides.
does the residence not have a front yard?
The residence's front yard would be off of the mutual access easement. Arguably, yes. It
Right,
becomes weird where.
But
they're different,
my point is,
Yep.
if that's gonna extend the full length of Sioux Boulevard. And so does that then apply to any future buildings on the business side? Because that now becomes a front yard. Even though we have a variance for a reduced frontage on the backside. You see what I'm getting?
Yep.
We're gonna have multiple front yards because we have multiple primary uses.
Arguably it would, because we'd look at the buildings rather than the uses, and we'd make the big box around them, and that would be a lot of front yard.
So I get, my point is, do we need to address that somehow? So that down the road, if they wanna make a change of how we're going to interpret front yard setbacks.
Yes, potentially. The hamster's going.
So that was another question I had, and then the last question I had was the side yard setback. So I'm assuming, lot 2 and lot 3 are gonna be R1 eventually?
I believe their intent is to keep them general business.
Even though the house sits alone on a parcel.
The house one, R1,
Yeah.
right? Okay, yes. R1,
Damon
and then
Coughlin,
lot 3
8610,
would have been
East
general
Sunset
business.
Circle, Brandon.
Okay.
Yeah, lot 2, they will want to rezone that as R1.
Okay,
Lot 3 is that little, just cutoff point that would be our future nursery, that's where highway easement is, so. However, we'd probably leave it a general business right now,
okay,
until we finished all of our stuff, brought it into the or what we're trying to do, and once we find out where the easement, or the, access is and all that, and go through all this again.
okay, so lot 1 is planned development, lot 2 is R1, lot 3 is general business.
Just leave it general business for right now, probably.
So can you go back up between 1 and 2? So that little building, so we got the three long rectangular buildings.
Yep.
You said you're gonna take those down.
Those will eventually go, yes.
What about that small building?
That will go also.
Okay.
With the other 3, it's just a little, like I said,
Okay,
it's a parking lot greenhouse that you see in front of Ace, sitting on blocks, so it's pretty temporary.
okay, cause the reason I asked is because that wouldn't comply with the 15
Yeah, that
foot
was a
side
little
yard setback.
tight. I know he's got 13.1, I measured it just the other day just to make sure, and it's about 14 foot, or it's about 9 inches to a foot off.
Okay,
But yes, that would go away with the other 3 also.
cause yeah, I think it says under exception number 3, required side yard of 15 feet shall be required where a lot is adjacent to or abuts a residential district.
Yep.
So,
And the main greenhouse, those buildings, we made sure to put that lot line 15 foot away.
so if we approve it in this fashion, that would be non-compliant. But I think we're kind of bending the rules here based on the fact that they're saying those 4 structures are gonna come down anyways. And then this is just kind of off the record, but, so that mutual access, that little that jog that goes into lot 2.
Mhm. Well, once the residence there is built and that's switched, that would actually be the front yard where there's a garage to access that driveway to leave.
Oh, so you're gonna access that little dog leg of lot one
Yes.
from that, not,
Yes, correct.
not from the west? Okay.
Well, so the main garage for the residence would face to the south, and there is the shop building part that's on the north end of it, that
Okay.
faces to the west.
Okay, that makes sense then.
Yeah, that's why that's there.
Okay. And I guess one last question, will the county be open to, accessing lot 3?
That's probably a DOT.
That's
Deal.
where they told us when we met with the DOT, when they redo that road, that's probably where they're gonna put that access, cause they wanted to line it up with one of the existing ones across. Again, they don't know for sure yet, that's kinda why we cut that where we did, just to give us a little bit of wiggle room. It has to be 600 foot from the lot to access to Split Rock Boulevard, so that's kinda where we made that.
Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure that we didn't create a parcel that we couldn't get access to.
No, that should be where they want to move the access.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So, this is a final review of a draft. Do we have to make a vote or make a recommendation or?
So I have noted some changes. It's a little hard to do the front yard versus side yard versus on the fly create an image, but we will need to work on that. And I don't know if it's just one of those things where we, on the image itself, do we define what it is as part of the PD, or that'll have to be further explored a little bit before the 3rd of July.
So do you wanna make a new final draft and we'll look at it at the next meeting then, or?
Your next meeting's the public hearing.
Oh, well,
Can you do it in a written format, or can you do it via a graphic attachment that would address the front yard?
Yeah. Written would certainly probably be more difficult, just because it's easy just to look at a picture and know. Written, you would end up with a legal description looking block, hence, thence, and description, but I will see what we can do about defining it on the exhibit.
Yeah, I guess the other way we could do it is, we could say right now that the front yard is, the 25-foot setback for the front yard is against Highway 11. That along Sioux Boulevard is 20 foot. Along Split Rock is 20 foot. And that southwest section along the mutual access is 25. So, if I can
We
point-
have defined them separately when
So
we did
this-
the,
This is gonna be the front of the house?
Yeah.
So if we just say this is 25 feet, and this is 25 feet, and the rest is 20, and just put that right in the document.
yep, we did something similar to that with the Augusta Place townhomes, because that kind of had a funky shaped lot as well, and we defined front yards based on its frontage access. So we can do a similar thing.
Yeah, just another thing too, I mean, looking at DOT plans and whatnot, in 3 to 4 years, all of that's going to change again anyway. So I don't even know what you'd call the front yard for lot 1, because they're looking at taking that access point away from us. And they're looking at eliminating Sioux Boulevard there too, so then I don't know what will happen where.
Oh, they are? They're gonna get rid of that curved access up to,
They would like to get
They
rid
would
of
like,
it,
that's,
but they are not
that's
gonna
in
get
their
rid of it.
plans, but.
they wanna make it just straight?
makes my head spin.
Yeah, they wanna have park come all the way up and that's the access to the bottom. But they would ask us to get rid of
Yeah, that would
our
be,
entrance there, so we would not have, basically, once we move, we wouldn't have access to that site off Split Rock anymore.
Huh.
It's already, if Sioux stayed there, it's a dangerous spot, knowing if people are turning or not, so that's part of the reason of getting rid of it. If Sioux was to go away, like I said, who knows, that's
So Sioux,
between DOT and Tammy.
so Sioux Boulevard would basically continue straight and stop at the
It'd end
south
up-
corner of the
It
school?
ended up being like on the DOT's plans, like a cul-de-sac down in the bottom by the school there.
Okay. And then Park would continue through the intersection.
Correct.
Up
It'd go
to-
all the way up to Highway 11.
And this is just talking, but so say they eliminate the primary entrance to Oak Ridge. Do they intend to, for the house, is
No.
that staying? Is that
For
going?
the existing Lot 2 house,
Yes.
that one would stay.
Okay. I was just wondering then how important does that mutual access easement become to be the primary entrance to the house? But if that stays, then
That one's fine, that's
Okay.
far enough from the existing Sioux Boulevard intersection.
So if they do that, they're telling you your only access is gonna be off Sioux Boulevard. That's not good.
That's why we're a little bit negotiating as far as giving us access to the other piece of property and a bunch of stuff.
Well, I guess you could do a mutual access off the residential entrance.
Yeah, brother might be fine, I don't know about his wife. If we had all that access coming through there. So, I mean, right now, for us to get access off the highway for the new one, they're in talks of making us pay to put in a left-hand turn lane on the highway, of which they would tear out 2 years later and put one in planned anyway. So, trying to negotiate a little bit on that one too, that, all right, we'll voluntarily give up that access if you wait a little bit on a turn lane or do something like that, so.
so Patrick, do you have enough to reword this or
I think so.
what you need for our next meeting?
So for July 3rd, I'll try to make a point to, while you can't internally discuss outside of a public meeting, I'll try to get the draft out to each of you individually to ponder before the public hearing, just because it will look different between now and then.
Okay. Good. So we're up to number 10 here, general business.
Thank you.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. Just leave you hanging there. Oh, yeah, thank you. Number 10, general business freestanding signs amendment, page 24.
So this is kind of what I gathered from the last meeting, but I am open to your thoughts on whether this is your current version of it. Now that we're discussing size, maybe that might change a little bit, maybe not, but so this is what my notes had as changes from the past meeting. So we didn't discuss it at the last one just because we were here till
10 o'clock.
very late. But this is from them 2 meetings ago, kind of my notes from there. So I am open to your thoughts on the draft.
The only comment I have, Patrick, is the third line down. Lots exceeding 200 square feet of linear frontage. I think that should be edited to read lots exceeding 200 linear feet, not square feet.
Correct.
200
That's
feet of
my
linear
only comment.
frontage, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and then the line below that too, one additional, oh, no, wait a minute. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Never mind.
I took out some squares, not enough of them.
And then, the the part that is highlighted in yellow, the question that Patrick put here that he highlighted in yellow. There was some discussion at the last time we talked about this, there was some discussion about limiting signs to only 2 frontages on a triple frontage lot. But he said he was not sure if a final decision was made. What are your feelings on
I
that?
want to say Mike kind of talked about that, but I don't want
Yeah.
to speak for him because he's not here. But
Okay.
I'm not sure if that was resolved or if it.
Yeah, I don't recall either.
I read that and thought back to that, and I can only speak for myself, but I think for me, I think the step down in square footage after 200 feet kind of resolved it for me.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Yeah,
Yeah, cause you look at, somebody that owns a whole block like Lewis,
yeah,
why would we not allow them to put a signage on all 3 entrances?
yeah, yeah. So,
Would you like this to appear as an ongoing discussion item while we're working through the overlay, or would you like it still on the agenda, or do you like it just not on the agenda but pending?
I'd like to see it parallel with the overlay district. 'Cause
Okay,
they're-
we'll just
to me,
keep them
they're
both
kinda-
on there then. And
Yeah.
even if it's just a no discussion but discussion item.
And then it leaves it on there for people that weren't present this meeting to have input on it next time too, so yeah.
sounds good. So we're good with that for now? And then, so next is item 11, decks and hard surface patios setback projections amendment. This is the part where it gets really riveting.
Yes. So
Page 26.
people present ideas, so we try to figure out language to potentially make them work. So this is the discussion from Chestnut Ridge's townhouses, and so I've tried to move things around to make it hopefully more user friendly. Leave D as talking about vestibules, and then E would be decks, hard surface patios, front, side, rear. But my understanding is Paul would. It's been a while since I looked at this one because we didn't get to it last time, so it's been about a month. So I'm trying to remember back to what our conversation was. So currently we allow what would be 2A. And then the single-family attached dwellings may expand the full yard. So that would be the same for single-family attached. The thing now is Mr. Van Overshield had those decks that were above 12, and they kind of were at different levels based on the slope down of the property. We were trying to figure out a way, and those would go between the property lines, but of course they weren't a patio, open, unenclosed, and uncovered less than 12 inches. So what 2B is kind of the change there. What basically we would treat them as part of the principal structure. They just have to be in the setback. It would be essentially an attached accessory structure. So if the building can go up to the property line, the deck could. If the building couldn't, the deck couldn't. So.
Anyone else? Good? We can proceed to the next step on that one?
Sure.
Okay. And now, number 12, variance appeals process amendment, page 28.
So the section 1 is proposed text. Current text is below. I kind of highlighted the reasons why we might want to look at a change. The first one is filing of the Board of Adjustments written finding by the Board of Adjustments chair. Barb doesn't really come in and submit written findings. Paul writes them down, and that's what we have. And then it later goes on that the city council shall enter its decision within 10 working days after the appeal is filed. There are some calendar dates where you may have your appeal at the second meeting, and then they file it within a day or two. Then the city council would not meet within 10 days, so it puts them to comply, we need a special meeting situation. And then the last one is its decision. But what I tried to do is mirror the language off of what we have more closely with the conditional use permit. I tried to make the language read somewhat the same.
So this is more just a matter of cleaning up language and bringing it up to date.
Yes. Because I don't want to run into a situation where timing works out in such a way that we can't follow our own process.
Any comments, questions? Good?
I like it, yep.
Okay, very good. That can
Before
move on.
before we move off this, I kind of alluded to it before the meeting. I guess I'd like to maybe spend 2 or 3 minutes just having a discussion about the appeal process, kind of relative to Monday night. So at our last meeting, we didn't approve the variance. We didn't have enough votes to approve the variance. And so the paperwork basically that we would typically fill out was blank. And then the applicant went to city council, presented the same information, but they didn't have to go through that process of filling out the paperwork,
Yeah, the checklist.
and putting down the hardship. And so I guess I wanna have an understanding in my mind. Was that correct? Was that incorrect? Because now moving forward, there's no defined hardship. If someone else comes in for a variance and they use this as precedence, there's no defined hardship on that form that would say, yes, we gave it to them because of this reason, other than they wanted to see it from farther away. So, I guess I just want to raise that question, of what,
Yeah.
what is that? What is the correct process? Is city council obligated to define hardship if we're not able to in approving a variance? Because that's basically what they did, is they approved the variance, we did not.
We denied it.
So conceptually, yes, they found a hardship. Whether notes were taken at that meeting and the form was filled out, I do not know. But conceptually, yes, the city council would be required to find the hardship to overturn.
Yeah.
It would just be basically rehearing the matter. So they would still have to follow the same process that you did, with the same vote required and everything else.
And then when the city council then have to fill out that form, like we have to fill out.
Conceptually, yes. I don't know whether or not that happened, though. I can kind of frame, based on the discussion, what they thought the hardship was, it being the difference in elevation between the ground of Brandon 90 Plaza and the height of Split Rock Boulevard. But whether that was articulated and written down somewhere, I do not know.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
So one, just not to prolong that, but I was trying to find a copy of that as we see it. I mean, I looked in the ordinance and found the section on variances, but I was thinking that form as we see it, I guess I could look back last week's agenda and see that, but, so the fact that we couldn't get enough votes for any of the attempted actions on it, it was a failed motion. I think if it's an explicit failed motion that receives enough votes, doesn't it infer that the form is to be completed with that by us also not only on a approved, so
But
maybe.
denied, yeah.
I mean, conceptually, you would fill out the form either way. It
Yeah.
just would be you couldn't find the hardship. I
Yeah, that's
believe
true.
there's
It's
probably
hard to,
thing you could circle that is not granted or something. I think there's
Yeah.
something in the form.
okay. Yeah. So I'm just remembering sometimes in the past, at least on one or two occasions where I think, someone has kind of offered a placeholder for basically their idea of hardship for the purposes of discussion, and we've continued on, and then whether it passes or fails, that's carried with it. And so, I don't know, it is an interesting situation we were in.
Well, we denied, it says here we denied it. So, yeah,
Which I guess is right. Anything that's not either an approval or a continuation becomes a denial because
Well,
it's a
there-
failed.
yeah. Yeah,
Ideally, under Robert's Rules of Order, every motion would be a positive motion. That way, it would be even if you're not going to vote for the motion, you can propose and second a motion. It would be a motion to approve, and if it fails, it fails. Everything would be a positive motion if you follow Robert's Rules of Order to the way they want it.
So you're saying we shouldn't be making motions to deny?
If you wanted to follow exactly Robert's Rules of Order, everything would be a positive motion.
and then just everybody votes no and then it fails. But, okay, so, just to clarify, if the motion fails or if we move to deny and it passes, then is the form still filled out? Is there, I know we just talked about
It
it,
should be, yes.
but the form should still be, yeah, okay. Well, now we know. Yeah. Okay, we're at the end of our agenda. Is there anything else?
As of the end of May, we have issued 17 single-family permits. As of 20 last year, 17 this year. Multifamily, as of the end of May 2025, is 58. This time last year would have been 14. So we're up quite a lot on multifamily and down a couple on single-family.
Very good. I see we have a couple of rezoning applications and a public hearing for our July 3 meeting. And, well, we're still gonna be meeting on July 3, even though it's the day before the holiday. Do we need to talk about that or no? You will not be here. I will be here.
I think informally after last meeting, I think a quorum said they would be here, but if
Okay.
for the members not here, if you happen to go back and listen to this and know you won't be around on July 3rd, we would appreciate it if you could let us know.
I can call in.
Okay. All right. Very well. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
No, I'm so moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. We are adjourned at 7:50 p.m.